The band was playing a sweet, slow song when my son leaned in and told me it was time for me to leave. Not whispered with regret, not softened with a gentle hand on my arm, just 4 plain words delivered like he was reading a weather report. "You should head home now." I was still holding my champagne glass. I hadn't even taken a proper sip yet. The bubbles were still rising to the surface, tiny and cheerful, completely unaware that my world was about to crack right down the middle. I stood there for what felt like a very long time. The music kept playing. People kept laughing. Someone dropped a fork somewhere behind me, and the sound barely registered because all I could hear was those 4 words repeating in my head like a broken record. I looked past my son to where my daughter-in-law was sitting at the head table. She was wearing white, of course, a beautiful lace dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her hair was pinned up perfectly, not a single strand out of place. She had one hand resting on her wine glass and the smallest smile on her lips. Not a big smile, not a mean smile, just a tiny curve that said everything without saying a single word. In that moment, I understood something I had been refusing to see for months. This wasn't just a wedding. This was goodbye. This was them closing a door and hopping I wouldn't notice I'd been left on the other side. I set my champagne glass down on the nearest table. The bass touched the tablecloth with a soft little sound that somehow felt louder than the whole band. I picked up my purse, straightened my dress, and I walked toward the exit. I didn't run. I didn't stumble. I just walked. One foot in front of the other, past tables full of people who had no idea what was happening, past the giant flower arrangements I had helped pay for, past the photographer who smiled at me like everything was just wonderful. The doors closed behind me, and the music cut off like someone had pulled a plug. Suddenly, there was nothing but silence and the distant sound of crickets starting their evening song. I stood there in the parking lot for a minute, maybe 2, just breathing, forcing my shoulders to stay still, forcing myself not to fall apart right there under those fancy string lights. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 64 years old. I live alone in a farmhouse in western Pennsylvania that's been in my family for 3 generations. I've been a widow for 13 years. I thought I knew what heartbreak felt like. I thought I had already survived the worst life could throw at me. But standing in that parking lot, watching the lights of that fancy resort glow through the windows, I learned that heartbreak comes in flavors you never expected. Inside that building, my only child was toasting his future. And I, the woman who had given him that future, was standing in the dark like someone who had overstayed her welcome. I got in my car and I drove away. The road wound through vineyards and hills, the sunset painting everything gold and orange. It should have been beautiful, but all I could feel was a coldness spreading through my chest. Not anger, not yet, just a terrible, clear understanding that something had been broken that could never be fully fixed. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand who I was before that night. Not because I'm looking for sympathy, but because you can't understand why those 4 words cut so deep unless you know how much of myself I had poured into that day. I was born in that farmhouse. My daddy was a farmer, my mama was a school teacher, and together they taught me that family meant showing up, no matter what. When I married my husband Tom, he moved into that old house with me without a second thought. He used to say the walls had good bones and good memories, and that was worth more than any new build. Tom passed away when our son David was just 12 years old. Heart attack. Fast and merciless, just like that. One minute he was fixing the kitchen faucet, the next minute he was gone. I still remember the sound of the wrench hitting the floor. I still remember David calling for his dad, running down the stairs in his pajamas, not understanding why I was on the phone with 911 and why my voice sounded so strange. After that, it was just the 2 of us. I worked as a nurse at the county hospital. Day shifts at first, then evenings, then nights when the money got tight. There were weeks I worked 6 days straight, coming home after David was already asleep, leaving again before he woke up. I lived on coffee and sheer determination. I told myself every single day that this was temporary, that things would get easier, that I just had to hold on a little longer. I missed so much. School plays where I sat in the back row because I showed up straight from work and still had dirt under my nails. Parent-teacher conferences where the teacher looked at my scrubs and spoke slower, like I might not understand. Baseball games I watched from the parking lot because I couldn't afford the entry fee, but I couldn't bear to miss it entirely. But I never missed the important things. I was there when David got sick, sitting up all night with cold washcloths and bad TV movies. I was there when some older boys picked on him at school, holding him while he cried and telling him those boys would peak in high school and he would peak in life. I was there when his first real girlfriend broke his heart, heating up frozen pizzas and letting him talk until 2 a.m. I learned how to be both mother and father. I learned how to fix the lawnmower and how to talk about feelings. I learned how to stretch a paycheck until it screamed and how to make a birthday cake from a box mix that still felt special. I wasn't perfect, not even close, but I showed up. Every single time I showed up. Summer evenings, David and I would sit at the kitchen table with his homework spread out everywhere. I'd make iced tea and we'd work through math problems together, his brow furrowed in concentration, me fighting to keep my eyes open after a double shift. Sometimes I was so tired the numbers blurred together, but I stayed. I stayed because I needed him to know that he wasn't alone, that we were in this together. I remember all the things I said no to. No new clothes for me, no vacations, no fixing the porch roof even though it leaked every spring. Everything went into David's college fund. Every extra shift, every canceled plan, every maybe next year when he asked about something we couldn't afford. When his acceptance letter came, I held it in my hands and cried so hard I couldn't read it out loud. Not from pride, though I was proud. From relief, I had done it. I had kept my promise to Tom and to myself. David was going to have a future. When he met Amanda, he was 27. She was polished and pretty with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I noticed it the first time we had dinner at my house. She was polite, very polite. She complimented the food, asked the right questions, laughed at the right moments. But there was a distance there, like she was following a script instead of actually being present. I told myself I was being paranoid. That's what mothers do, right? We look for problems that aren't there. We see threats where there's only differences. I didn't want to be that mother-in-law. The one who can't let go, who meddles, who makes everything about herself. So I stepped back. I stayed quiet. When they made plans, I waited to be invited instead of assuming I was included. When Amanda made comments about my house being old or my cooking being different from what she grew up with, I smiled and let it slide. When David stopped calling as much, I told myself that's what happens when kids grow up. They build their own lives. That's the goal. That's what you raise them for. When they announced their engagement, I was genuinely happy. David looked at Amanda like she hung the moon, and I wanted that for him. I wanted him to have the kind of love Tom and I had shared. When he asked if I could help with the wedding costs, I didn't hesitate. I didn't tell him that the amount he mentioned would drain most of my savings. I didn't tell him I took out a small loan from the credit union to make up the difference. I didn't tell him I picked up extra shifts even though my back had been bothering me for months, standing for 12 hours at a time until my feet swelled, and I had to soak them in Epsom salts just to sleep. I didn't say any of that. I just wrote the checks and told myself this was the last gift, the last big thing I could do for my son. A mother doesn't keep score, right? That's what I believed. The wedding was at a vineyard in the Finger Lakes region of New York. Beautiful place. Rolling hills, rows of grapes, a big barn converted into an event space with string lights and exposed beams. Amanda said she'd always dreamed of a rustic chic wedding. And I nodded like I knew what that meant. The invitations were on thick paper with fancy calligraphy. The flowers were all locally sourced and organic. The cake had 4 tiers and cost more than my first car. I arrived early on the wedding day. The weather was perfect, warm but not hot, with a light breeze that made the grape leaves flutter. I wore a deep green dress, knee-length, modest, exactly the style Amanda had suggested when she sent out the dress code. Garden formal, she called it. The dress cost almost $500, more than I'd spent on clothes in the past 5 years combined. I stood in front of the mirror that morning and wondered if I was trying too hard. Then I smiled at myself and said, "You're the mother of the groom. You're supposed to look nice." The ceremony was beautiful. I'll give them that. Amanda walked down the aisle in her lace gown, her dark hair curled perfectly, her father beaming beside her. David stood at the altar with tears in his eyes, and I cried too. I cried for happiness, for Tom not being there, for the long road that had brought us to this moment. When they said their vows, I believed every word. I believed in forever and family and all of it. Afterward, there was cocktail hour, then dinner, then dancing. I stood near the dessert table, champagne in hand, watching David laugh with his college friends. I was waiting for a quiet moment to give him the envelope in my purse. Inside was a check for $5,000, my last little gift to help them start their life together. My hands had shook when I signed it, but in a good way. The way you shake when you're giving something from the heart. That moment never came. David walked toward me, and something in his face made my stomach drop. This wasn't the relaxed, happy groom I'd been watching all evening. This was someone with a mission, someone who had made up his mind and wasn't planning to change it. "Mom," he said, "you should head home now." I actually laughed a little, a confused, nervous laugh. "What?" "Amanda is uncomfortable," he said, his voice lower now. "You're standing here by yourself and it's making her anxious. She feels like you're watching her." I looked around. I was standing by a table. Alone, yes, watching. I was watching my son at his wedding. Was that wrong? "I haven't said a word to her all evening," I said. My voice sounded small, even to me. "I know, but she can feel you. She's stressed. Her family is here and she just wants to enjoy her day without feeling judged." Judged, the word hung in the air between us. I had spent years bending over backward not to judge that girl. I had swallowed every comment, every suggestion, every piece of advice a mother might normally give. I had made myself small, quiet, undemanding. And still, I was too much. I looked past David to where Amanda sat at the head table. She was talking to her mother, but her eyes flicked toward us for just a second. And there it was again, that tiny smile. Not quite a smirk, not quite victory, just a small curve that said, "See, I win." I nodded, just once. I set my champagne glass down on the dessert table, picked up my purse, and walked out. No one stopped me. No one called my name. The music kept playing. The laughter kept floating through the warm evening air, and I walked out of my son's wedding like I was nothing more than a caterer whose shift had ended. I drove for hours, not toward home at first, just away. Away from the vineyard, away from the string lights, away from the sound of that band playing songs I'd never be able to hear again without feeling sick. The GPS kept trying to reroute me, telling me to turn around, telling me I was going the wrong way. I ignored it. I needed to move. I needed the road to unspool in front of me and take me somewhere, anywhere that wasn't there. Around midnight, I stopped at a rest area. Not because I was tired, but because I couldn't see the road anymore. Not from darkness, from tears. They came finally, not in a rush, just a steady stream that blurred the white lines into a watery smear. I sat in the car with the engine running, and the headlights pointed at a patch of grass and a sign that said, "Welcome to Pennsylvania." I cried until my chest hurt and my eyes felt like sandpaper. Then I dried my face with a napkin from the glove compartment and kept driving. The rest of the drive was a blur. Road signs, exits, the glow of truck stops, the dark shapes of trees against a slightly lighter sky. I don't remember most of it. What I remember is the silence in the car. No radio, no podcast, just the hum of the tires and my own breathing in and out, proof that I was still alive even though part of me felt like it had died back there. I got home just as the sun was coming up. The farmhouse looked the same as it always did, weathered gray wood, wide porch, the old swing creaking in the morning breeze. I sat in the car for a long time just looking at it. This house had seen 3 generations of my family. It had seen me come home from my first date, from my honeymoon, from Tom's funeral. And now it was seeing me come home from my son's wedding, carrying nothing but a purse and a broken heart. I went inside, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table. The same table where David used to do his homework, where Tom and I used to play cards on Saturday nights, where my parents had sat and worried about the farm and the weather and the future. The sun came through the window and fell across my hands, and I watched it like I'd never seen sunlight before. The phone didn't ring, no text came, no "Did you get home safe?" "No, I'm sorry, Mom." Just silence, heavy and complete. I sat there for a long time, and slowly, piece by piece, I started putting things together. The little comments Amanda had made over the past year. The way she always seemed to be nearby when David and I tried to talk. The helpful suggestions about how I might want to think about downsizing, about moving somewhere smaller, about how nice some of those retirement communities looked. I had brushed it all off, told myself I was being sensitive, told myself this was just how daughters-in-law and mothers-in-law were, always a little awkward, always figuring out the boundaries. But now I saw it differently. I saw a pattern, a plan, a slow and steady campaign to push me to the edges of my son's life. And the wedding, that final push, wasn't an accident. It wasn't wedding stress or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was the culmination of something that had been building for a long time. The question that formed in my mind as I sat at that kitchen table was simple and terrifying. If I could be erased from my son's wedding, what else would I be erased from? I didn't know the answer yet, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. The phone rang the next morning around 9 o'clock. David's name appeared on the screen, and for one stupid, hopeful moment, I thought maybe he was calling to apologize. Maybe he'd had time to think, to realize what he'd done, to miss his mother. I answered. "Mom, you made it home okay." His voice was so normal, so casual, like he was checking off a to-do list. "Yes," I said, "I'm home." "Good. Hey, listen, I need to ask you something." I waited. Amanda and I were talking last night after everything settled down. We've been thinking about the future, and we want to talk about the farm. The land, I mean. Can you send me the paperwork? The deed, the property records, all of that. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The farm. Yeah, we've been doing some research. Do you realize how much that land is worth? 40 acres, close to the state forest with that creek running through it. Developers would pay a fortune. We could subdivide, sell off parcels, maybe keep a few acres for ourselves and build something nice. Amanda's dad knows some people in construction. He says we could make a killing. I gripped the phone tighter. "David, this land has been in our family for 3 generations." "I know, Mom. I know the history. But we have to be realistic. You're not getting any younger. The upkeep is a lot. You could move somewhere smaller, easier to manage. There are really nice places with activities and people your age. You'd probably be happier." People my age, activities, a nice place. He was talking about putting me in a retirement home so he could sell the land out from under me. "David," I said slowly, "your grandfather bought this land with money he saved from working 2 jobs. Your great-grandfather built that barn with his own hands. Your father and I planted those fruit trees the year you were born. This isn't just land. This is our history." And I get that, I really do. But history doesn't pay bills. We're talking about your future, too. If we sell, you'll have money. You could travel, do things you've always wanted to do. Doesn't that sound good? I closed my eyes. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. Does Amanda know you're asking me this? She's the one who suggested it. Her family has experience with this kind of thing. They know people. We could make it happen fast. Of course she was behind it. The wedding, the push to get me out, the casual suggestion that I move somewhere easier to manage. It all fit together now. The wedding wasn't the goal. It was just a step. Get me out of the way, then go after the land. "I need time to think about this," I said. "Time? How much time? The market's hot right now, Mom. We need to move on this." I said I need time. There was a pause. When David spoke again, his voice was different, harder. "Fine, but think fast. We're not going to wait forever." He hung up. I set the phone down on the kitchen table and stared at it like it was a snake that might bite. This was my son. The little boy I'd held when he was scared, the teenager I'd stayed up with when he was sick, the young man I'd sacrificed everything for. And he was talking to me like I was a business deal that needed closing. I got up, walked outside, and stood in the yard. The grass was wet with morning dew. The old oak tree at the edge of the field was full of birds singing their hearts out. The barn stood where it had stood for almost 100 years, weathered but solid. Everything was the same. But I was different. Something in me had shifted, and I knew there was no going back. I walked down to the barn and put my hand on the old wooden door. My father's hand had touched this same wood. My grandfather's, too. Tom had replaced some of the boards one summer, and I could still see the places where his hammer had left small dents. This place wasn't just property. It was memory made solid. The question David had asked echoed in my mind. How much time? As if this was about timing. As if the only thing standing between him and what he wanted was a few weeks or months. I walked back to the house, picked up my phone, and called the one person I knew could help me. Helen Porter had been our family lawyer for as long as I could remember. She handled Tom's will, helped me with the paperwork after he died, advised me on taxes and such over the years. She was in her 60s, sharp as a tack, and not someone you wanted to mess with. I drove into town that afternoon and sat in her office, a small room filled with law books and the smell of old paper. Helen listened without interrupting while I told her everything. The wedding, the phone call, the demand for the land. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. Margaret, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. What do you want? I want to protect the land. From your son. From anyone who wants to destroy it. Helen nodded slowly. There's a way to do that. It's called a conservation easement. Basically, you donate the development rights to a land trust. The land stays in your name, but you give up the right to ever subdivide or develop it commercially. Once it's done, it's permanent. No one can undo it. Not you, not David, not anyone. I frowned, so I wouldn't own it anymore. You'd still own it. You can live there, farm it, pass it on. But you'd be giving up the right to ever sell it for development. The land would be protected forever. I thought about this. And David, what would that mean for him? It would mean he can't do what he's planning. He can't subdivide, can't sell to developers, can't make a killing, as he put it. He could inherit the land someday, but only with the easement attached. It would be protected land, not developable property. I sat with this for a minute. The clock on Helen's wall ticked softly. Outside, a truck rumbled past on the main street. He'll be furious, I said. Probably, but Margaret, you need to ask yourself something. Is your relationship with your son based on you giving him what he wants? Or is it based on love and respect? Because if it's the first one, that's not a relationship. That's a transaction. I knew she was right. I'd known it for a while, maybe longer than I wanted to admit. The last few years, David had called less, visited less, asked for more. Every conversation seemed to circle back to what I could do for him, what I could give, how I could help. And I'd been so afraid of losing him that I'd said yes to all of it. I need to think about it, I said. Helen handed me a folder. Here's some information. Read it over. Call me when you're ready. But Margaret, don't wait too long. If they're already pushing this hard, they're not going to stop. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and read every page. Legal language, dry and complicated, but the meaning was clear enough. If I did this, the land would be safe. No developers, no subdivisions, no bulldozers. The trees my father planted, the barn my grandfather built, the creek where David used to catch frogs, all of it would stay just as it was forever. But if I did this, I would be drawing a line I couldn't uncross. I would be saying no to my son in a way that couldn't be taken back. I thought about Tom, about how he'd held my hand in the hospital and made me promise to take care of the land, about how he'd said, "This place is more than dirt and trees. It's us. Don't ever let anyone forget that." I thought about my father, who'd worked this land until his hands were nothing but calluses. About my mother, who'd planted flowers along the porch every spring because she said beauty mattered as much as function. I thought about David, age 5, running through the field with a butterfly net, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. Age 10, helping Tom fix the fence, so proud of every nail he hammered. Age 16, sitting on the porch swing with his first girlfriend, nervous and sweet and still my little boy. That David wasn't the one who'd called me this morning. That David had been replaced by someone who saw his mother as an obstacle and his inheritance as an entitlement. I cried that night, Not the crying of the rest area, desperate and raw. This was different, slower. The crying that comes when you realize something is ending and you can't stop it. But when I woke up the next morning, I knew what I had to do. I called Helen on Tuesday morning and told her I was ready. She scheduled the paperwork for Thursday. I drove into town again, sat in her office, and read through every page one last time. The conservation easement was long and detailed, full of words like grantor and perpetuity and restrictive covenant. But at its heart, it was simple. I was giving up the right to ever develop this land. I was protecting it, not just for myself, but for everyone who would come after. Helen handed me a pen. "Margaret, I need you to be absolutely sure. Once you sign this, it's done. There's no going back." I thought about David's face at the wedding, Amanda's tiny smile, the phone call where my son talked about me like I was a problem to be solved. "I'm sure," I said. I signed my name, Margaret Ellen Collins. The pen moved across the paper, leaving blue ink on white. Page after page, I signed. With each signature, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief exactly, more like the feeling when you finally stop pretending. When it was done, Helen gathered the papers and put them in a folder. "I'll file everything this afternoon. It'll be official within a few days. You'll get copies in the mail." I thanked her and drove home. The afternoon sun was warm, the fields green, the sky that deep blue you only get in late summer. I parked the car and walked down to the old oak tree. I put my hand on its trunk, rough and solid, and I whispered, "I did it. It's safe." The tree didn't answer, of course, but the wind moved through its leaves, and somehow that felt like enough. That night, I sat on the porch swing and watched the stars come out. The phone was silent in the kitchen. David didn't call. Amanda didn't text. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't know then that the storm was still coming, that the worst was yet to happen. But in that moment, sitting on my porch, looking at my land under the stars, I was at peace. Whatever came next, I had done the right thing. The call came 3 days later. I was in the garden, pulling weeds, my hands covered in dirt. The phone rang in my pocket, and when I saw David's name, I felt my stomach tighten. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered. "Mom," his voice was strange, tight. "I got a letter from some land trust. They say you put an easement on the property. Tell me that's not true." I took a deep breath. "It's true, David." Silence, long and heavy. When he spoke again, his voice cracked. "You did what? You gave away my inheritance." "It's not your inheritance. It's mine. And I didn't give it away. I protected it." "Protected it from who?" "From me. I'm your son. That land is supposed to be mine someday. You had no right." "I had every right. It's my name on the deed." "But it's our family land. You can't just lock it up forever. That's not fair." "Fair?" I felt something rise in me, something I'd been holding back for a long time. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would be you calling to check on me once in a while. Fair would be you not asking me to leave your wedding. Fair would be you treating me like your mother instead of a bank account. That's not fair, and you know it." "Isn't it? When's the last time you visited, David? When's the last time you asked how I was doing, not what I could do for you? When's the last time you thought about me at all?" More silence, then quieter. "Amanda said you'd react like this. She said you'd make it about feelings instead of facts." "Amanda," I said her name like it tasted bad. "Does Amanda have a mother? Would she want someone treating her mother the way you've treated me?" "This isn't about Amanda. It's always been about Amanda. From the moment you met her, you've been pulling away from me, and I let it happen. I told myself it was normal, that you were building your own life, that I needed to step back. But stepping back isn't the same as being pushed out. And that wedding, David, you asked your own mother to leave your wedding. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" I was trying to keep the peace. "By sacrificing me, that's not peace, that's cowardice." The word hung in the air between us. I heard David breathing on the other end, fast and shallow. "So that's it," he said finally. "You're just done with me." "I'm not done with you, but I'm done being used. I'm done giving and getting nothing in return. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be different. It has to be real." not just when you want something. You're choosing land over your own son. I'm choosing myself. For once in my life, I'm choosing myself. And if that means you can't see me anymore, then that's your choice, not mine. David hung up. No goodbye, no I love you, just silence. I stood in the garden for a long time, holding the phone, staring at the rows of tomato plants I'd put in back in May. The sun was warm on my shoulders. A bird sang somewhere nearby. Life was going on, even though mine had just cracked open. I went inside, washed my hands, and made a cup of tea. Then I sat at the kitchen table and waited for whatever came next. What came next was worse than I expected. David didn't call again, but Amanda did, 3 times in one day. I let them all go to voicemail, but I listened to them later. The first was polite, almost friendly, asking if we could talk this through like adults. The second was cooler, suggesting I might not understand the legal implications of what I'd done. The third was angry, accusing me of destroying their future out of spite. Then came the letters, not from David, from a lawyer. Long, formal documents questioning the easement, suggesting I'd been pressured, implying I might not have been of sound mind when I signed. Helen handled it. She sent back short, professional responses that said basically the same thing. The easement was legal, voluntary, and permanent. For a while, I was afraid to leave the house. Afraid I'd run into them somewhere, afraid of what I might say, afraid of what they might say. I stayed close to home, worked in the garden, fixed things that didn't really need fixing. The land became my refuge, walking the fields, checking on the trees, sitting by the creek. Every time I felt overwhelmed, I'd go outside and put my hands in the dirt. It grounded me, literally. Months passed. Fall came with its colors and cool air. I harvested the last of the tomatoes, put the garden to bed for winter, stacked firewood by the back door. The leaves turned and fell, and I raked them into piles that reminded me of childhood, of jumping into piles my father had made, of his laugh echoing across the yard. I heard things, of course. Small town, people talk. I heard that David and Amanda were having problems. I heard that the development plans had fallen through, that the investors backed out when they learned about the easement. I heard that Amanda's family was pressuring David, that the marriage was strained, that maybe things weren't as perfect as they'd seemed. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me whispered that if I'd just given them what they wanted, maybe they'd still be happy. But another part, the part that had signed those papers, knew better. Their happiness wasn't built on anything solid. It was built on taking, on plans that required someone else to lose. That kind of happiness never lasts. Winter came, hard and cold. I stayed inside mostly, reading, watching the snow pile up on the porch. The house creaked and settled around me like an old friend. Sometimes I'd talk to Tom, just out loud, telling him about the birds at the feeder or the way the light looked through the frost on the windows. I knew he couldn't hear me, but it helped anyway. Spring arrived slowly, reluctantly. The snow melted, the creek swelled, the first green shoots appeared in the garden. Life was returning, and so was I. The deep sadness that had settled in my chest after that last phone call began to lift, just a little. Not gone, but softer, more bearable. And then, on a warm afternoon in late April, a car pulled into my driveway. I was on the porch, shelling peas from the farmer's market, when I saw the car. It was unfamiliar, a small sedan, not David's truck. I watched as it parked and the door opened. It was Amanda. She stood by the car for a moment, looking at the house, at me. Then she walked toward the porch. Slowly, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. She wasn't wrong. "Mrs. Collins," she said when she reached the steps. "Amanda." She looked different, thinner, tired. The perfect polish she'd always worn seemed worn away. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, just a plain sweater and jeans. Can I talk to you for a minute?" I set down the bowl of peas. "About what?" She took a breath. "About everything, about David, about the wedding, about what I did." I didn't say anything, just waited. "I was wrong." The words came out fast, like she'd been practicing them. "I was so wrong about so many things. I don't know what I thought, that you were in the way, that we needed to build our life without you, that you'd understand and just step aside." Step aside, I repeated. She flinched. I know how that sounds. It sounds terrible because it was terrible. I treated you like an obstacle instead of family. I pushed David to push you away. I told him you were controlling, that you didn't respect our marriage, that we needed boundaries. But the boundaries I wanted weren't healthy. They were walls. I studied her face. The tears in her eyes looked real, but I'd learned that real tears don't always mean real change. Why are you here, Amanda? Because I lost him. Her voice broke. I lost David. He left 3 weeks ago. He said he couldn't look at me without remembering what we did to you. He said I changed him into someone he didn't recognize. He said we destroyed the only good thing he had. I felt something twist in my chest. Where is he now? I don't know, he wouldn't tell me. He just packed a bag and left. I've called, texted, nothing. His phone is off. His friends say they haven't heard from him. I don't know where he is, Mrs. Collins. I don't know if he's okay. She was crying now, openly, not trying to hide it. I watched her for a moment, then I stood up. Sit down, I said. I'll make tea. She sat on the porch swing and I went inside. My hands shook a little as I filled the kettle, got out cups, tried to process what she'd told me. David was gone, missing, and Amanda was here on my porch crying. I brought the tea out and sat in the chair across from her. She wrapped her hands around the cup like it was the only warm thing in the world. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I don't deserve it, but I had to tell you, I had to admit it, I guess, to someone, to the person I hurt most. Admitting it is a start, I said, but it's only a start. She nodded, tears dripping into her tea. I know I can't fix this. I know I can't undo what I did, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did to you, to David, to everything, and I'm so ashamed. We sat in silence for a while, the porch swing creaking gently, birds singing in the trees. It was strange, sitting with her like this. The woman who'd smiled when I was pushed out of my son's wedding. The woman who'd planned to take my land. And now she was just a sad girl with a broken marriage and a cup of tea. Have you eaten? I asked. She looked up startled. What? Have you eaten today? No, I don't think so. I stood up. Come inside, I'll make you something. She hesitated, then followed me into the kitchen. I made sandwiches, simple ones with bread and cheese and some of the tomatoes I'd canned last fall. She ate like she hadn't seen food in days. I poured more tea and watched her. Mrs. Collins, she said between bites, do you think he'll come back? Do you think he'll ever talk to me again? I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if he'll talk to me either. That made her cry again, harder this time. She put her sandwich down and put her face in her hands. I sat across from her, not touching her, not saying anything, just being there. When she finally calmed down, she looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I never thought about what I was doing, not really. I just wanted what I wanted and I didn't care who got hurt. That's a terrible thing to realize about yourself. It's a brave thing to realize, I said. Most people never do. She stayed for a couple of hours. We talked, not about anything important after a while. I told her about the garden, about the birds that came to the feeder, about the history of the house. She listened, really listened, for the first time since I'd known her. When she left, she hugged me. A real hug, not the stiff, polite ones she used to give. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not throwing me out. I watched her drive away, then went back to the porch and picked up my bowl of peas. The sun was lower now, the shadows longer. I shelled peas and thought about my son, somewhere out there, alone. I thought about the woman who just left, carrying her guilt like a weight. I thought about the land, protected now, waiting. And I thought about forgiveness, what it means, what it costs, whether I had any left to give. Another month passed. The garden grew. The days got longer. I planted, weeded, watered. Life went on. And then, on a Tuesday morning, a letter came. I recognized the handwriting immediately. David's. That familiar scrawl, messy and rushed, like he couldn't get the words down fast enough. I took the letter inside, made tea, sat at the kitchen table. The same table where he'd done his homework, where we'd eaten countless meals, where I'd cried after that first phone call about the land. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. "Mom," it began. I read it slowly. He wrote that he'd been staying with a friend in another state, working a construction job, trying to figure out who he was. He wrote that he'd had a lot of time to think, too much time maybe, and that thinking had shown him things he didn't want to see. He wrote about the wedding, about seeing me standing there alone, about knowing it was wrong but saying it anyway, about the look on my face when I left, how it haunted him, how he couldn't get it out of his head. He wrote about Amanda, about how she'd pushed him, but how he'd let her, about how he'd traded his mother for a woman who made him feel like a man, and how empty that felt now. He wrote about the land, about realizing that he'd never really seen it, not the way I saw it. To him, it was just property, something to use. To me, it was memory, history, love made solid. He wrote that he finally understood the difference. And then, near the end, he wrote this. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I don't expect you to want to see me. I broke something that might not be fixable, but I needed you to know that I know. I know what I did. I know who I became. And I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I made you feel like you didn't matter. You matter. You always mattered. I was just too blind to see it." I folded the letter and set it down. My hands were shaking. My eyes were wet. But underneath the sadness, underneath the pain of all those months, something else was stirring. Something that felt like hope. I didn't call him that day, or the next. I needed time to think, to feel, to let the letter settle. I walked the land, touched the old oak, sat by the creek. I thought about Tom, about what he'd say. I thought about my parents, about the life they'd built here. I thought about David, the little boy who'd caught frogs in this creek, who'd climbed this oak, who'd once been so full of light. And I thought about forgiveness, real forgiveness, not the easy kind that pretends nothing happened, the hard kind that looks at the hurt, acknowledges it, and chooses to move forward anyway. On the third day, I picked up the phone. He answered on the second ring. "Mom." "David." Silence, then shaky. "You got my letter." "I did." More silence. I could hear him breathing, could picture him somewhere, probably sitting down, probably scared. "I meant every word," he said. "Every single one." "I know. I don't know if we can fix this. I don't know if you can ever trust me again. But I want to try. If you'll let me, I want to try to be the son you raised, the one you deserved." I looked out the window at the land, green and gold in the afternoon sun. The oak tree stood where it had always stood, solid and patient. The barn, the fields, the creek, all of it waiting, like it had been waiting for generations. "Come home," I said. "What?" "Come home, David. We'll talk, we'll figure it out, but come home." He cried then. I heard it in his voice, the way it broke and wavered. "Okay, Mom, okay, I'll come home." We hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, not moving, just feeling. The hurt was still there. It would be there for a while, maybe forever. But underneath it, something else was growing. Something that felt like the first green shoots after a long winter. He came 3 days later. I saw his car pull into the driveway and I went out to meet him. He looked older, thinner, tired. But his eyes were clear, and when he saw me, they filled with tears. "Mom," he said, and his voice broke. I opened my arms and he walked into them. He was taller than me, had been for years, but in that moment he was my little boy again. The one who'd needed me, trusted me, loved me without conditions. We stood there for a long time, holding each other, the land stretching out around us. The oak tree watched. The barn watched. The creek kept flowing, the birds kept singing, and life somehow kept going. It wasn't easy. I knew it wouldn't be. David stayed for a week, then went back to tie up loose ends where he'd been living. A month later, he moved home. Not into the house, not at first. He stayed in town, in a small apartment, and came out to the farm almost every day. We talked, a lot, about everything. About the years he'd been pulling away, about Amanda, about the wedding, about the land. He told me things I hadn't known, about the pressure he'd felt to be a certain kind of husband, about the way Amanda's family had made him feel like his past didn't matter, about the voice in his head that whispered that wanting things made him weak. I told him things too, about the loneliness of those years after Tom died, about the fear that I wasn't enough, about the way I'd buried my own needs so deep I'd forgotten they existed, about how hard it was to finally stand up, to say no, to choose myself. We cried together. We laughed sometimes too, tentatively at first, then more easily. We worked on the farm, fixing things that had been broken for years. We planted a new vegetable garden. We rebuilt a section of fence that had fallen down during a winter storm. Amanda called a few times. David talked to her, long conversations I didn't ask about. Eventually, they filed for divorce, quietly without drama. She sent me a letter afterward, thanking me for that day on the porch, for the tea and the sandwich, for listening. I wrote back, short but kind. I hoped she found peace. I meant it. The land stayed protected. The conservation easement was solid, unchallengeable. Sometimes I'd walk the property and think about what I'd done, and I'd feel a surge of something that wasn't quite pride but was close. I'd saved this place, not just from developers, but from the idea that everything can be bought and sold. Some things are supposed to stay. David got a job at a local hardware store. He started dating a woman from town, someone he'd known in high school. She was quiet and kind, with a laugh that made you want to laugh too. When he brought her to meet me, she hugged me hello, and I felt something shift. Maybe this time would be different. One evening, David and I were sitting on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. He was quiet for a while, then he said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever regret it? The easement, I mean, giving up the development rights." I thought about it, really thought about it. The money we could have had, the things it could have bought. Then I looked out at the land, at the oak tree, at the field where he'd run as a boy, at the barn my grandfather built. "No," I said, "not for 1 second." He nodded slowly. "I didn't think so, I wanted to hear you say it." "I protected what mattered," I said. "That's never something to regret." He reached over and took my hand. His hand was bigger than mine now, warm and solid. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that. You're here now, that's what matters." The sun went down, the stars came out. The porch swing creaked gently. And for the first time in years, everything felt exactly as it should. Part 13, What I've Learned. I'm 66 now. 2 years have passed since that wedding. 2 years since my son told me to leave. 2 years since I signed away the right to ever develop this land. Sometimes I look back and I can barely recognize the woman I was before. The one who said yes to everything, who sacrificed without thinking, who believed that love meant never saying no. That woman was tired, so tired, and she didn't even know it. The land is still here. The oak tree still stands. The barn still holds the marks of my grandfather's hammer, my father's repairs, Tom's careful work. And now, David's too. He comes out most weekends, works alongside me, talks about maybe building a little cabin on the far end of the property. Not to sell, just to have. A place for him and his girlfriend for quiet weekends for the future. I've thought a lot about what happened. About Amanda, about David, about myself. And I've come to understand some things I wish I'd known sooner. Love isn't about giving until you're empty. It's about giving from a place of fullness and knowing when to stop. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. They keep out what doesn't belong and let in what does. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is say no. I've also learned that forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a process, slow and uneven. Some days I look at David and I feel nothing but love. Other days, the hurt surfaces, sharp and fresh, and I have to remind myself that healing takes time. He understands. He's patient. We're both learning. The conservation trust that holds the easement sends someone out once a year to check on things. They walk the property, make sure everything's as it should be. Last time, a young woman came, fresh out of college, passionate about protecting land. She walked the fields with me, asked questions about the history, took notes. When she left, she shook my hand and said, "Thank you for doing this. People like you are why places like this still exist." People like me. I thought about that for a long time after she left. People like me. just a widow in an old farmhouse who finally learned to stand her ground. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to set a boundary, to say no, to protect what matters. You might lose people. I almost did. But the people who truly love you, the ones worth keeping, will find their way back. And the ones who don't, they were never really yours to begin with. I still love my son. That never changed. But now I love him differently. Not desperately, not fearfully, just steadily like the land itself. I'm here. I'll always be here. But I won't disappear anymore to make someone else comfortable. The porch swing creaks. The wind moves through the oak leaves. Somewhere in the house, the clock ticks, steady as a heartbeat. This is my life now. Quiet, full mine. And if you're listening to this, wherever you are, I hope you find your own quiet, your own fullness, your own place to stand. I'm sitting on the porch as I finish telling you this story. It's late afternoon, the kind of golden light that makes everything look soft and beautiful. David's here. He's down by the barn with his girlfriend, Sarah, showing her where he used to hide when he was little. I can hear her laugh from here, bright and real. The garden is doing well this year. Tomatoes, peppers, basil, all the things I love. I've been teaching Sarah to can, and she's a fast learner. Last week she made jam all by herself and brought me a jar. It's sitting on the kitchen counter, a small purple jar with a label that says, "For Margaret with love." Amanda got married again, I heard. Someone from out of state. I hope she's happy. I hope she learned from what happened the way we all did. The Land Trust is planning a small nature walk next month, open to the community. They want me to come to talk about the history of the property. I said yes. It feels right, sharing this place, letting others love it too. David and I have dinner together most Sundays. Sometimes here, sometimes at his apartment in town. We don't talk about the past much anymore. We're too busy making the present, planning the future. He's talking about proposing to Sarah. He asked me what I thought, and I told him the truth. She seems like someone who sees him, really sees him, and loves what she sees. That's rare. That's precious. I still think about Tom sometimes, especially when I'm in the garden or sitting on this porch. I talk to him still, telling him about David, about the land, about the birds at the feeder. I like to think he'd be proud of me, proud of how I stood up, proud of how our son came back, proud of this place, still standing, still protected. The sun is getting lower now. The shadows are longer. In a little while, I'll go inside and start dinner. David and Sarah are staying tonight, sleeping in the guest room I fixed up last month. We'll eat, talk, laugh, just like a family should. I think that's the thing I've learned most of all. Family isn't about blood or obligation or what you owe. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. It's about the porch swings and the Sunday dinners and the quiet moments when you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be. So if you're listening to this, and you're in the middle of your own hard thing, your own breaking point, your own moment of choosing, I want you to know this. You can do it. You can stand up. You can say no. You can protect what matters. And you can still love even after. The porch swing creaks. The wind moves through the oak. And somewhere inside, the clock keeps ticking, steady and sure. This is my story. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, if it made you think of your own life, your own choices, your own people, I hope you'll share it. Not for me, for yourself. Because sometimes telling the truth is the only way through. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people we love find their way back. Wherever you are, whatever you're facing, take care of yourself. You matter. You always have. Thank you for staying until the end, for listening to my story with patience and empathy. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and follow so we can continue listening together to more stories about family, about boundaries, and about values that cannot be sold.